You know that the war in Ukraine has shattered the myth of Russia's invincibility, or rather, let's say, its victoriousness. The gene of victors and all the victory frenzy, all the fictional heroics propagated by the USSR have been flushed down the toilet of this senseless, endless war. And what remains is just a persistent horde that slowly crawls over its own corpses, to nowhere and for no reason, reduced to dust in the village. It crawls until the moment Trump finally frightens Putin. That is, ideally, there is no room for any pathos anymore. There is no place left. And Trump also adds to it, he constantly wipes himself with this illusion of Russian sovereignty and leaves scraps of paper everywhere. But, however, this has not deprived Russia of the ability and passion to kill. And yesterday morning, the hand of Russian death reached the center of the city of Sumy. But the regime remembers that it is obliged to periodically entertain its people, to amuse and arrange for them a celebration. And as the 3-year experience of war and bombings has shown, the greatest jubilation is caused by not the apple feast, but the cluster feast. That is, many, many peaceful Ukrainians torn to shreds. This is especially relevant on those days when over the Russian Federation there are gathering what is called on the world stage, various clouds, and some serious trouble occurs. It happened yesterday. And Trump, after listening to his special envoy who returned from Russia, and he reported to him that Putin's paranoia remains acute and he is not genuinely inclined towards peace. Suppose what a revelation until Trump immediately signed the extension of all sanctions, and that is an action. Yes, he allows himself a lot of contradictory rhetoric. He grumbles a lot, as they say, because they bow. Nevertheless, this extension of sanctions which the hated Trump imposed on Biden, that is an action. And this is what should be paid attention to. And everyone noticed. To invigorate the population and shift its focus from these sanctions to something positive. The armed forces of the Russian Federation bombed the center of the city of Sumy. And it was a church holiday. As they say, there were many targets on the streets. Everywhere, elderly women with branches, ladies with shopping, and children with candles were bustling about. And with 2 rocket cluster missiles, they managed to kill 35 people on the streets and in a trolley bus, including 2 children. That is to say, the efforts were not in vain. Russian social media immediately exploded with delight. Everyone stopped, worrying about the sanctions, and rejoiced. How did it happen? They are the ones celebrating. You can check it out on my Telegram channel. It's from yesterday. You need to watch. By the way, there is also all sorts of highly unique footage of what's happening in Sumy. But how they celebrate, how they rejoice, and how widespread it is, you can read it yourself. And it's hard to believe that it's not just some young people from Nudi. There are different people. I watched against it. It's hard to believe that just a couple of decades ago, these same people squinted and blushed and cried from shame for the Russian paratroopers cut down with entrenching shovels. Old women in Tbilisi. They cried, raged, broke windows in administrations, and soldiers' mothers, weeping, wandered the roads of Chechnya, rescuing their sons and publicly cursing the authorities. Nevertheless, these joyful, enthusiastic, admiring, overwhelmed with the saliva of happiness observations and impressions. These are the same people. In other words, we see that the conditioning of the Russian people has been remarkably successful